put into place the concept of stateful widgets, we're going to do a very simple exercise here by building a quotes app. Now, this is a very simple quotes app. Essentially, we're going to have a button that says inspire me. When you click, you notice the text here is going to be changing. We're going to be rotating through different quotes that I have hard-coded. The main focus here is for us to understand how to set a state of our views. That way we're able to pass that state in our views and you can see the redrawing happening. In our case here, you can see that we're going to be redrawing with new quotes. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Let's go to our home.dart here and I'm going to add another class. Let's close all of this down and this as well. Essentially all of these old classes there. So in this case here, instead of saying stateless, we are going to start with stateful widgets. So hit enter and I'm going to call this wisdom. It sounds powerful. You can call it whatever you want, but wisdom it is. Now notice the beauty here is that using the help to create our stateful or stateless widgets is that it gives us all the boilerplate code that otherwise we would have to write ourselves. So it's very handy. Notice here we have this override create state, okay, which returns a wisdom state. What is this wisdom state? Notice it's what we have at the bottom here. And this wisdom state, notice it's private because we have underscore, extends a state which contains a wisdom type, which is this class here, okay? And so the idea here is that now that we have a stateful widget, we can create down here, see there's container, we can actually create the user interface and also any variable or view that will contain that state that we want. So firstly, we are going to construct our user interface. So here I'm going to pass a scaffold. Right now, we're not going to add an app bar. So there is that option because earlier we would put an app bar and add that. But in this case, we're just going to get rid of it. We don't want an app bar. We're going to straight to our body. I'm going to add a new container. As such, we'll have a child. This child is going to be a column. Let's go to a space. And what are we going to add, first of all, is make sure that the axis alignment, I'm going to say main axis alignment is going to be center, such. And then this is where we're going to put our children. So we're going to have a very simple user interface, as you saw earlier. We're going to have a text view, which will hold all of the quotes. And then we're going to have a button at the bottom. And in the middle, we're going to have a few filler widgets as well. Okay, for now, I'm going to add a text here real quick. In this text, I'm going to say first quote like this. Okay, let's save this and give it a run. Just to make sure that things actually, before we do that, we need to call this wisdom in our main here, right? Because we still have business card. We want wisdom like that. So let's run again. Hopefully we should see something. So you can see here, it says first quote. Very nice. So it is working as expected. And still inside here, what we're going to add is we're going to add a flat button icon. So I'm going to say flat. You can see here, there's different kinds of flat button, a few other ones. So we're just going to go use the first one, which will allow us to add an icon. Okay, for onPressed, we're going to ignore for now. And for icon, I'm going to say icon like that and pass in icons. And I want a web sunny. You can invoke anything you want. That is totally fine, up to you. And for the label here, I'm going to just put something that says inspire me like that. Well, this is wrong because it actually has to be a widget, not just a string. And inspire me. Okay, save this. You can see we have our button there. And just like we had before, because we don't have anything in our onPressed, it just doesn't do anything, right? It's not highlighted and we can't really do anything with it. That's totally fine. Let's go ahead and format everything, the entire code. Very good. Now you see that onPressed here, we are going to be passing something. What are we going to be passing is going to be a show quote method. So I'm going to say underscore show quote. Like this. Now we haven't created this yet, so I'm going to go ahead and create a method with it. So there we go. Now we have our show quote here. Now, what is the thing that we are trying to do here? Well, we are trying to make it so that when we click this button here, we are going to go through an array and start pulling out quotes. Now let's get that array first before we get too far ahead. Now I already have this quotes, a list of quotes per se. So arrays and lists, same thing. And I'm going to just copy and paste it here. That way you don't have to go through the process of me typing everything. Okay, so this is just data. Say quotes here, and we have a few quotes that I got from the internet. And now we want to show this data here. Now, the first thing we can do actually is just to show that we can actually pull something from our quotes list. I can just say quotes as such and pass 0. So this means we're going to go and get the first item in our array. If I save this, we should see we have that quotes. Oh, I think I put it in the wrong place. Yes, I put that in the wrong place. It should be here. Come here and I say quotes and pass 0. Or if I want it, I can pass 1. Doesn't matter. Okay, so you can see now we have that second quote. And you can see now that onPressed is actually showing something or the behavior that we would expect, because now at least we passed something as opposed to having a null. Very good. Okay, so how do we then make it so that when we click this button here, because this is the flat button, this button here, we invoke our list and we start grabbing items that will be shown here? The concept is very simple, especially now that I've shown you that you can just pass the quotes and pass the index and go through as you click. So the idea is when you click at the Inspire Me button, we're going to increment a counter of some sort that will then be used as an index. What I mean by that is the following. So at the top here, I'm going to create a variable, a private variable. I'm going to call this index and give it a 0 to start with. Okay, this is going to be our counter. So what we're going to do is in our show quote here, we are going to increment our index or counter by 1 each time, right? Which means every time we increment it, we're going to pass it as an index here, which also means that we are going to be able to iterate through and show each one of the quotes we have in our list. So the idea here is just to be able to do something like this. Index, our private, and we're going to increment it. There's different ways to increment. We can say plus plus like this, or we can say plus equals 1. So each time we're going to increment by 1. We know that the show quote is being called here. So the idea is that each time we click, we're incrementing by 1. So if it's 1, then it goes and gets the second item. If it's 0, it gets the first quote. Let's see if this works. Let's run one more time just to make sure. Okay, moment of truth. Click. Click, and really nothing is happening. Well, what is happening here? What's happening is exactly what you would expect if you think about it. Even though we said that show quote here, it's being called onPressed, and the number is actually incrementing. However, the problem is that it's not actually been redrawn, or it's not been set as a state. The state object that it's waiting to change its own state, in this case the index, it's not being updated. The reason why is because we need to actually set this state or set this value so that it's recognized as a state. Okay, that's why this is not working. That's why you see at this point, even though we are passing our index and our index here is also being incremented because we have incremented here, even though semantically all of that is correct, it's just not working. Only works if we actually wrap this inside of a set state. If we say set state, notice we have this method available to us. Why is it available to us? It's because we know that we are in a stateful widget. So this framework knows what needs to be done. Whenever you have a stateful widget, you have access to this method called set state, and you can use it anytime you need to. Okay, if I put all of that inside here now, save, notice what's going to happen. I click, look at this. Now I'm going through all of the quotes. Now we get a problem here. This is what we call the out of range error in lists or arrays. What this means is because we're incrementing, each time we increment, our index increments obviously, which means the number we're putting here is also incrementing. The problem arises when the length of our list, right, how many items are inside here, when it is exceeded here. Meaning, if the length, let's say the length of this is 10, meaning we have 10 items inside of this list or array, then as we continue to increment, we get to 11, it's going to go ahead and say, well, this quotes list here doesn't have the 11th element. Therefore, I don't know what to do. This is confusing, and let's just break. That's what's happening here. There are different ways to account for that, but I'm going to show you a really nice, quick, and clean trick to actually eradicate this problem. All we have to do is actually pass the modulo like this, and then say quotes dot length. That's all. So what this means is the following. As the index goes up, so imagine that index is 1 modulo quotes length. Let's say the length is 8, 9, 11 about. What we mean here is the following. So if we take a number that we get, imagine the first time is 0. So 0 divided by the length of our array or list, in this case, let's say it's 11. 0 divided by 11 is 0, because 0 times 11 is 0. That means then this whole expression here is going to return 0, which means it's going to be the first item. So quotes is 0. Goes and grabs the first item. We're good. And then the second time we have incremented our index is 1. 1 divided by 11 is 10. Remainder is 1. And then this whole thing is going to be 1. So we are incrementing until we get to 11. So 11 divided by 11 is 1. In that case, there's no remainder, which is 0, which means this whole thing goes back to 0. So that way, we never get to that point where our array, where our index is more than the length of our array. This is a nice trick here. Okay, that's it. So if I save this now, you notice if I keep going, I can keep going here. I never get to that problem ever, because we can rotate through all of these items. So trick that you can always use if you want to make sure that we are constantly going through our array and never getting to the point where we're ending. Okay, that's it. So at this point here, our app is working really, really nice. All of that because we're able to say set state and make sure you have this set state. Otherwise, as you saw, it's not going to work, because it's only when we set the state, we're saying to our framework here that, okay, we need to set the state of this index. So when it changes, then it propagates this message to our framework that, okay, something has changed, a number was incremented. Then we have to redraw our user interface, in this case, by showing the next quote. Okay, so that is the main idea here. And all it's left now is just the cosmetics, which we are going to be doing in the next video.